Here I've got a fresh import of a design. It's a pretty complicated design. It's got an FPGA on it, and as you can tell, it takes a lot of space. There's a lot of rooms, and this is actually an import of a design that I've done before to do an example of the new plugin that I'm developing. So one of the frustrations for design reuse that I'm trying to address is when you have laid out a room, a schematic sheet. Let's say, well, let's pick one of these. For instance, like the BGA capacitors that you bypass with. I've got a room somewhere called decoupling. Yep. So I've got a 484 pin BGA, and it's got all these capacitors that all have to be placed on the correct banks. So you can manually spend a bunch of time putting them in the right places, but then once you do that, you'd like to never have to do that again. So anyway, you can see all these rooms that I've got here, all kinds of components. And for this design, I've placed all this before, and I've stored the room placement information on the schematic page using my plugin. So let's just see what happens here. So for this decoupling room, this is for the FPGA. If we right click on the room and say place room components from schematic parameters, this is a shortcut menu that I've added. Let's see what happens. Okay, there we go. So it kind of placed them over other rooms, but let's see if we can clean this up. So there we go. Still some aligning to do with the FPGA. Note that we can't use copy room formats yet, because you can only copy between an existing design, an existing layout within the same design. Let's try another one. There we go. So we can just go through here and place everything from the stored placement parameters that we had before. And that frees us up to use things like snippets for tracks and vias, polygons, stuff like that. And just note how easily I'm right clicking, I'm saying place room from schematic parameters. So there's not a lot of massaging. It's just, I know that there's techniques out there where you can say reset all the designators from, set them all to like a really high number, like 1,000, and copy the layout, copy the schematic, and push them all in. But I found that this works really well. This one's also a nice one to do that with, because it's got so many components, top and bottom. And so honestly, what I found is this just makes the design reuse of a breeze. It makes it pleasant to use. There's less errors with the process, and it makes it honestly so anybody can do it. You don't have to be an Altium wizard. So what the plugin is doing is it's going and finding the parameters for the relative locations of the component from the bottom left corner of the room. And that one's kind of funny because the room was defined. Kind of funny. But here's our FPGA. And let's see if we can sync those guys back up. So that's not perfect, but I mean, you can tell, we'll have to sync that up a little bit. We can't put those in the same room because the FPGA room is auto-generated. But I don't know how much time does this really save us? I mean, I would say on a complicated design like this, I would spend at least 8 hours going through and placing everything. And this doesn't address all of that. I'll still have to go through and be careful how I place things. But it gets you a head start. You can start. To me, it's kind of like playing Tetris. You go through and you place all these blocks of circuitry arranged in rooms on the design to try to get it as tight as possible. And most designs, they have some new circuitry on them, so you would have to manually place that. But for the designs where you've got everything placed already in a previous design and you've stored it off, the storing is pretty easy too. I'll show that in another video. But I mean, you can imagine this would, like I said, this would take 8 or 10 hours per design. And how many designs do you do a year? I find myself doing at least one a month, and they're not all this big, but 10 boards a year, maybe like 4 hours a board, maybe not that much. There it goes. Online DRC always wants to slow things down. But I always, overwhelming is not the right word, but when you first come into a design and you've got components spread out everywhere, it can be a little daunting. And knowing that you've got maybe half of the rooms with some prior placement, or you can just go through and clean things up really easily. Psychologically, it's helpful, I think. And maybe, honestly, one thing that you probably haven't noticed is that it's grabbing the designator, formatting, and locations too. I mean, that's another thing that at the end of the design, you spend several hours for a design this big cleaning up all the silk. Maybe that's a little bit of exaggeration. You can get a little bit quicker sometimes. I don't have the bottom silk layer turned on here. But you can see that the plugin is smart enough to place all the silk as well. I'm using a command to wrap an orthogonal room around components. It's super handy. And I'll skip over. This is a 20 channel design, and let's see, here we go. There's one there. But once you've got this, once you've got the components placed in one room, then that frees you up to do the copy room formats to the other rooms, which can be a little quicker. And not every design has 20 channels, but you get the idea. So this was too tightly spaced to put all the designators there, so they're all placed off to the side. Here we go. Let's do the copy room formats. Oh, missed a checkbox. This command is great. This copy room formats. Here we go. Apply to specific. Okay, so I've got all the channels specified. Okay. So I'm placing snippets to for the track work. I don't do that right away, but you could see how you could just place a snippet on one of these rooms and then use the copy room formats to copy it over to all of them. Let's try this one. So this has been about 10 minutes so far, just going through and doing this. And I shudder to think how many hours that would actually be. And it's kind of brainless. I'm not thinking real hard doing this. Okay. Now let's do our copy room formats again. The script. Okay, here we go. Let's try this again. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but this happens once in a while, and there's not an easy way to fix it. So let's, instead of channel offsets, let's try the source designator. We'll just say okay. See if it can figure it out that way. It looks like it's doing it. Alright, sweet. Sometimes that doesn't work either. That's usually when the component links are messed up. So if I would have spaced these out a little bit better beforehand. I'm going to turn the online DRC off. Alright, slowing everything down. Anybody else looking forward to the release of Altium Designer 18? Seems like that'll be pretty cool. Anyway, you get the picture. These guys are all placed. These are placed as well, mostly. So now it's been about 12 minutes into the video, and 95% of everything's placed. The things that weren't in rooms that were on the top page, those weren't placed. But that's not a big deal. Usually you have to manually place connectors and stuff like that anyway. So now we've got all these blocks placed, and all in 10 minutes or so. So we probably saved ourselves, I'm guessing, at least 8 hours for something like this. So I don't know. Tell me what you think. Leave a comment. See if there's any gaps in my understanding. I posted it recently on the forum, and some guy had come up, his name is Eric, came up with a great way to do this without a script. I think it takes longer, maybe, I'm guessing at least 100 clicks or keyboard presses, whereas this is a lot quicker. But if you don't have the plugin, it's on the forums. So anyway, thanks for watching. Let's get a conversation going. See what you think or have any suggestions. Thanks.